Oh, flip. Okay, let me do it right away. Let me do it right away.
Morning, Margot and Andre. I'm just checking if you can hear me.
We can, Jody.
Perfect, thank you.
Good morning. I'm not sure if I'm audible.
Good morning, Mr. Dukwana. I can hear you clearly.
Oh, okay. All right. The presentation for us.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Who will be sharing the presentation from the NGB on the platform?
I would have wanted Yvonne to share the presentation.
Okay, we will give Yvonne sharing rights, but hold on to sharing because we'll start our proceedings with our sharing of documentation before NGB will be able to share documents.
Okay, okay.
Morning, Andre. If you can just do a roll call.
Chair, good
Recording
morning,
in
Chair,
progress.
and everyone on the platform, Chair. Maybe we are only currently have 4 members on the platform, Chair. Shall we wait a minute or two, Chair?
Okay.
Good morning, Chair. We're correct. Shall I do the roll call, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay. Mr. Three,
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues.
Mr. Mndluli,
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'm here.
Mr. Chance,
Good morning. I'm here. Thank you.
Ms. Motekatsi,
Present, Chair. Good morning.
Mr. Gama,
Good morning, President Chair.
Chair. Those are members currently on the platform, Chair, and we have some apologies. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we please fly to the agenda? Thank you very much, colleagues. Can we get the mover and seconder for the agenda as per our program?
Chairperson, I move for the adoption of the agenda.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you very much. The agenda is seconded. And then apologies, Andre.
Chair, we have apologies from Mr. Nchingila, Mr. Langa, Mr. Gigaba, currently Chair. Others may still join the meeting, but those members are on oversight visits currently, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. The purpose of the meeting today is the briefing from the National Gambling Board as well as the National Lotteries Commission to engage on their financial and non-financial performance for 2024 financial year. This is also that the committee can assess the performance of the National Department against the resources allocated in compliance with Section 5 of the Money Bill Amendment and Related Matters Act number 9 of 2009. I will now give an opportunity to the team that is led by the DTIC. I've not seen if who's here, if the DG is here or the minister or the minister.
The DG is on the platform and will lead the delegation, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. I hand over to you, the DG, and then we will allocate you at least they can share about 1 hour, 20 minutes, both presentations, so that we can then are able to indulge them. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to engage with the committee. commencing with an apology on behalf of the minister who is traveling. In the interest of time, within the timeframes that we have as afforded by the chair, we have these two presentations, one by the NGB, led by Mr. Dukwana, who is the acting CEO at the NGB and whom we are introducing to the committee belatedly, and also apologizing for probably not having done so proactively in the recent past, as he had joined NGB around July and has been steadying the ship ever since then. Suffice to say that the minister is hard at work in stabilizing the leadership at NGB and improving governance to the extent that there will, in the next couple of weeks, be an appointment of that board through cabinet, having followed the process to source membership of the board and have them recommended to the minister for appointment, and then to cabinet for noting. And then for purposes just of completeness, that would mean that the board, beyond fulfilling its normal duties, would have as amongst its key tasks the task of further establishing permanent leadership in the form of a permanent CEO, and all other processes will follow thereto. I would like to hand over to the CEO acting at NGB to take us through the presentation as prepared for the chair and the committee. Thank you very much, Chair. Over to you, Dukwana.
Thank you very much, DG, for that. And thanks for that introduction. Thank you to the Chair, Honorable Chair, and the Honorable members. I am going to present on behalf of NGB, the annual performance of NGB. Can we just make sure that the slide is on? Just whilst we're waiting for the slide to come in, Chair, I can report that I will be starting with the presentation. Mainly on the presentation, I will start with the introduction. I think let's put on the presentation mode. The first slide obviously covers the content that we are going to be dealing with. And firstly, we'll deal with the issues around the mandate of the NGB. Can you put it on the presentation mode? Thank you. Maybe, Jay, let me introduce the team that we actually have on our side. I'm accompanied by the CFO, Ms. Makaduth, and then we are joined also by Ms. Kwenbure from Strategy, and as such, we'll be sharing the presentation. We'll also be joined by the CTO and the CCO on some of the interactions. Can you put it on presentation mode? I don't think that is on presentation mode.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to do that, but it seems like on my side, it is in presentation mode. I'm not sure on your side.
All right. Is it all in presentation mode for all of us? Because it doesn't look like it's on presentation mode on my side.
No, it's not for me.
Okay, let me reshare. Stop sharing and reshare. Okay. All right. Are you able to see? Is it better now?
I can't see yet.
Okay, now?
Yes, now it's better. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for that delay, Chair. Well, the presentation will cover a few areas. Number one, we'll deal with the issue of the National Gambling Board and the mandate thereof. We'll deal with the issues around the vision, mission, and values of the organization. We'll obviously look at the issues around the structure as well. And then we'll conduct an overview of the gambling industry as at the period of the report, but also we'll do the actual performance against the APP. And then we'll deal with the issues of the financial performance. It will be followed by the audit findings. And lastly, the matters that we think that they do need attention in terms of the environment where we operate. We can go to the next slide. Now, if you look at NGB, the National Gambling Board is obviously established in terms of the NGA Act, specifically number 7 of 2004. We are a scheduled 3A of the Public Finance Management Act of 1999. Obviously, we're under the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition. Next one, the vision that we cover. We at the NGB, we aim to position NGB as to position South Africa as a preeminent jurisdiction with an exemplary and effective regulated gambling environment. We think that that's an important vision that we are pursuing as an organization. The mission, we must lead, obviously, the regulation of the gambling industry in the fulfillment of the National Gambling Act. That will do through the effective regulation and supervised gambling industry that upholds the domestic, continental, and internationally recognized standards of compliance. The values, I'm not going to go through them, but some of them include professionalism, transparency, teamwork, and respect and tolerance among them. Next one. On the next slide, we then cover the overall mandate. Well, one of the aspects of the mandate we have as the NGB is oversight of gambling in the Republic of South Africa. That covers two aspects. The first aspect is obviously conducting the oversight evaluation of the performance of the provincial licensing authorities so that we can ensure that the national norms and standards established by the National Gambling Act are applied uniformly and consistently throughout the Republic of South Africa. I think this is the primary aspect of that oversight. The second one is the assisting PLAs to ensure that unlicensed gambling activities are detected. Now, this means that in terms of that unlicensed gambling activities, we have to have a concurrent activities in dealing with this particular aspect with the PLAs. But also we're doing the monitoring of the market conduct and the market share. We deal with the aspects of the monitoring of socio-economic patterns of gambling activity and research to identify patterns of the socio-economic impact of gambling and addictive or compulsive gambling. We're also establishing and maintaining the national registers and advising and also providing recommendations to the National Gambling Board, to the National Gambling Policy Council, the NGPC, especially around the matters of national policy and legislative changes relating to gambling. But also we provide a broad-based public education, a public education national program on the risks and socio-economic consequences that relate to gambling. Next one. Now, if you look at the structure, Chair, as it is now, on top, we're supposed to be having the board and then the chief executive. There are 4 areas, which is the first one is the finance and procurement aspect, corporate services and research, enforcement, and the last one is the issue of gaming control and compliance. Those form part of our structure, and the last 2 are actually the ones that form the core business of implementing that part of the act, including the research aspect. Next one. Now, I am going to just take this slide, Chair, around the issue of the gambling matrix. After that, I'll ask Mr. Gwenure to continue with the other slides. One of the things, Chair, that we have seen in terms of the gambling prevalence for the financial year 23-24, it was standing around 65.7%, which is quite high in terms of the prevalence in relation to the survey that we actually conducted on our side. Also, the other stats that I think are important is the issue of what we identified as what would refer to as the problem gambling prevalence. When you still look at the same financial year 2023-24, that was standing around 31%. If then you go and look at the gambling turnover in the financial year 2024-25, we are sitting around 1.5 trillion. Obviously, it includes all of the sectors, it includes all of the modes, and also across the PLAs, if one would actually look at that. And then the gross gambling revenue, it was around 75 billion. That is 2024-25 as well. It's 75 billion rands. And then the total GGR or gross gambling revenue from the online betting in financial year 2024-25 was sitting around 60%. Now that gives an indication of the prominence around the two areas, around the area specifically of online betting, which obviously has an effect in relation to the physical casinos as we would be having them. So that's sitting at 60% for 2024-25. And then we have the 5.8 billion rands of taxes and revenue that were collected for the same period. Now, if you look at the direct employment in the gambling industry for the same period, it's 33,169. That's where it's at. But if you look at the extended one, which includes direct and indirect jobs, you will realize that we were sitting around 144,619 if you look at that one. That obviously includes also some of the sectors that support the gambling industry, to speak of, that are in the value chain of the gambling industry. And then the other one is the issue around the contribution to the GDP. In 2023-24, sitting at 0.83%. That's the contribution to the GDP. And in relation to the number of illegal gambling raids that we conducted for the same year, we did about 22 raids that we conducted. Obviously, this function is the one that we conduct jointly with the PLAs in the various PLAs that we actually have in the country. And that issue is one of the most important aspects that we're dealing with in making sure that the gambling sector is actually functioning the way it is actually functioning and deal with the illegal aspect. There are 3 million people, that is the total number of people that we actually reached in terms of awareness interventions that we conducted. This obviously also talked to the urban and the rural people that we actually may have reached at that particular stage. We can go to the next slide, which I will ask Ms. Kwenhore to take over from here in terms of the analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Dukwana. Good morning, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee and members. So just to continue the presentation, providing a breakdown essentially of the industry that the NGB has jurisdiction over. In 2024, gross gambling revenue amounted to 75 billion. And when we break this down into the specific gambling modes that we regulate as NGB, the betting sector essentially generated more than half of the industry GGR. Are at 70%. When we look at the number of direct jobs out of the 33,000 that Mr. Dukwane had highlighted in the previous slide, 13,983 of those jobs have been created within the betting on horse racing and sport sector. Casinos generated 16.6 billion of the 75 billion, making up 22% of the pie, and generating 13,759 direct jobs. The LPM industry, which is the limited payout machine industry, which are slot machines located outside of a formal casino, is our third largest sector, and it generated 4.1 billion out of the 75 billion. It's 66%, sorry, of the pie, and 2,894 direct jobs were also came out of this industry. The bingo industry, which is our fourth sector, generated 1.7 billion, which is about 2% of the pie, which has, this sector also generates 1,804 direct jobs for the 24-25 financial period. And then when we break down the GGR per province, we would see that the Western Cape province essentially generated the greatest share of the pie, generating 23.1 billion of the 75 billion GGR, followed by Mpumalanga at 30%, generating 22.6%. And Gauteng being the third largest province at 13.5 billion, 18% of the pie. We also had provinces such as Limpopo generating about 4.5 billion at 6%. And then the Eastern Cape at about 3%, which is about 2.1 billion. Northwest at 1.5 billion, 2%. And lastly, the Northern Cape, which is at about 486 or 487 million. And the Free State, I think it's also about 1% of the pie as well. Now, when we look at the taxes that are generated, which is one of the main reasons for the regulation of the industry, which are the taxes that are generated, this amounted to 5.8 billion during 24-25, mainly driven by the betting sector, which managed to account for 59% of those the total taxes at about 3.4 billion, followed by the casino industry, which generated about 30% at 1.7 billion. And then the LPM industry at 9%, 525 million. Lastly, the bingo sector at 2%. Provincially, again, we see sort of the same picture where the Western Cape was the main driver of revenue, or taxes rather, generating 30% of the total taxes, followed by Mpumalanga and the Gauteng province. Now, when we look at the growth rate of GGR, just looking at just a year after the COVID pandemic, obviously being a year when the land-based fraternity of the gambling industry was shut down, but then obviously rebounded once everything was opened up. What we see is that the casino GGR fell by about 4.1% over the past financial year, coinciding with a decline in operational slots and tables. Essentially, we had about 21,813 operational slots in 23-24, but by the end of 24-25, this number had declined by about 2% to 443 slots. The same applies for the number of operational tables within the casinos. There was also a decline from 910 to 890, which essentially, points to the fact that there has been a fall in consumer demand, with casino operators probably opting to reduce operational slots, tables, and machines within their environments due to, low consumer demand. But what we have definitely witnessed is the online slots have certainly shown significant growth, suggesting that there has been substitution that has been taking place with punters gambling online in place of the physical or land-based sort of slot machines. The betting sector, as we see from the second group of bars, is essentially continuing to show exceptional high growth, growing particularly at about 44 or 45% between the year 23-24 and 24-25. However, we do see that that rate of growth has been kind of slowing down since 22-23. And when we look closer over the past year, we do notice that operational retail bookmaker outlets actually declined from 594 to about 553. which may explain sort of the slowdown in growth, albeit that, this is still in line with the fact that, other land-based models are generally declining. So the exceptional growth that we see of online gambling may also explain the decline in land-based electronic gaming. So when we look at the other sort of sectors of the industry, which is the bingo industry, the LPM industry, we are witnessing negative growth in the past financial year, where it's pointing to the fact that customers are opting to essentially engage more of their gambling activities online. So when we also look at a close trend analysis over time, at least over the last decade, the trend in share of total GGR between the modes from 2010 up to the current year under review shows that, essentially back in 2010-11, the casino industry had the larger market share, or was the larger market shareholder in terms of GGR at about 81.9%. But this market share has since declined over time, as we saw also, the other modes of gambling sort of performing at a moderate level in terms of the trend when we look at bingo and LPM. But specifically for betting, we see from 2016, the market share begin to rise, slowly, but particularly at the juncture of the time when we experienced the COVID-19 pandemic. That is when we saw a structural shift in the landscape of the gambling industry, where betting essentially took off and became the larger market shareholder over casinos, and has since basically had exponential growth and increase in market share, going up to 70% in the current financial year under review, with casinos essentially following a declining path since the impact of COVID hit. So we also recently had interactions with the Statistics SA on one of the surveys on the personal services industry survey, which looks at essentially income coming out of certain services, personal services, one of which is the recreation area where gambling would fall under. So this survey is also pretty much, corroborating exactly what we are seeing in the terms of the performance of the industry, where gambling has really grown in popularity over the recent years, specifically accounting for about a third of the revenue generated in terms of personal services, right there up close to health services. So this explosive growth is linked to technology, which has essentially disrupted the destination approach to gambling, and it was essentially exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Chairperson, I will now move on to just the actual performance against our annual performance plan of the NGB. In 24-25, the NGB managed to achieve 13 out of 14 of its annual targets, which translated to about 93% achievement of targets. We had endeavored to essentially achieve outcomes linked to some of the national priorities that the government of South Africa is pursuing, which are in line with transformation, a capable state, and industrialization. And the first output we endeavored to produce was, monitor economic transformation opportunities that were within the gambling industry for HDIs. And the target there for the year was a consolidated report, which we were able to achieve this report successfully. The second target was mainly premised on monitoring technical compliance of gambling games, machines, devices that are within the industry in our quest to ensure that all of the gambling activity in the country is monitored adequately from a technical perspective. So here we also endeavored to produce a consolidated report and on the compliance of these gambling machines, devices, as well as games, and we were able to achieve this target by producing a consolidated report. The third area is the facilitated revenue generation in the LPM industry. We particularly target this output because as the National Gambling Board, we, through our National Electronic Central Monitoring System, we have the ability to monitor in real time the LPM industry. And so we targeted to basically look at facilitating 2.5 billion revenue generation in the LPM industry through our constant monitoring of our system. And we were able to overachieve on this target because through our monitoring capabilities, we were able to facilitate at least 4.2 billion revenue in the LPM industry. Part of our mandate is then also espoused within the fourth output, which is the oversight role that we have to play in terms of ensuring compliance with the NGA of PLA activities. So we had endeavored that for the year we would conduct 9 PLA compliance evaluations, which cover the 9 provinces. And essentially, our planned target was to ensure that 100% of the evaluations of PLA's compliance with gambling legislation would be conducted, and we were able to achieve this percentage by conducting the sufficient number of the relevant number of evaluations. The fifth target is the advisory notes on uniformity in relation to gambling industry, and here we targeted 4 advisory reports that in relation to issues of uniformity within the gambling legislation, and we were able to achieve this by producing 4 reports for the year. Another part of our mandate, Chairperson, is the basically confiscating unlawful winnings that emanate from illegal gambling activity. And so we did target this output, specifically looking at some of the investigations that have to do with the circumstances of illegal gambling activity. And here we had endeavored to measure it by looking at the percentage of targeted investigations completed on the circumstances of illegal gambling activity. Now, initially we had set the target at 100% of the total cases targeted for investigation, but however, we were unable to achieve this target due to the dependencies that we have, where there were incomplete NGB2 forms that had no contact details for us to sufficiently be able to investigate cases and ensure that funds were either refunded or confiscated to the state. And so we were only able to investigate 5.5% of the total number of cases. And so it culminated in that one unachieved goal out of the 14. Then in terms of the same area or mandate around, assisting PLAs to detect unlawful gambling activities, we endeavored to, implement interventions to protect the gambling industry by way of, undertaking raids and also registering specific cases with the SAPS. And so here we targeted that we would undertake at least 4 interventions to protect the industry, and we were able to actually achieve 22 interventions through raids, as well as 10 interventions through actual notices issued. And this is simply because we were able to collaborate with other law enforcement agencies like the SAPS, as well as the provincial licensing authorities, to be able to undertake these activities. One of our mandates is also to monitor market share and market conduct, as well as, the socioeconomic impact of gambling within the Republic. So here we have 2 specific areas that deal with this mandate with respect to essentially looking at gambling sector performance on a quarterly basis and ensuring that, industry trends are able to, provide us with information or sufficient research that would help for us to make informed decisions when it comes to the gambling sector. So the target here was to produce 4 reports for the year and 1 annual report, which is based on audited information. We normally rely on statistics from the PLAs for us to be able to do these types of trend analysis. So we were able to actually produce 9 reports, 4 of which were based on the unaudited data and 1 annual report which was based on audited gambling sector performance data. And in addition to that, we also produced some further analysis just to look at some of the socioeconomic implications of, this change in landscape in gambling. In terms of the research, we had targeted to produce about 1 consolidated report just on the impact of the gambling industry. And so we were able to produce this report. And in addition to that, also produce reports covering economic analysis, as well as benchmarking the South African industry against other jurisdictions. I think the next target is also centered around our other mandate, which is to basically ensure that we undertake broad-based public education on the socioeconomic risks of gambling. So in this target, we mainly targeted specific community outreach interventions that would then inform and educate the public on the risks and socioeconomic impact of gambling. And here we were able to conduct 64 broad-based outreach interventions against a target of 40 for the year. So we were able to overachieve on that target. And another target that we had out of that was just to sort of showcase some of the case studies in terms of, the impact that the NGB measures are having on, communities with respect to workers, firms, entrepreneurs, and professional individuals. So we were able to achieve this target by producing 10 case studies to showcase our work as the NGB. In terms of industrialization, we had targeted that we would ensure that the entity spent about 160 million in additional local output. And so we had planned or targeted that 160 million for the 24-25 year, and we were able to overachieve on this target, where we specifically spent 187.8 million in additional local output. In terms of transformation, we also endeavored to spend 100 million specifically on goods and services from Black-owned entities. And here we were able to overachieve on this target by achieving 199 million spent on the procurement of goods and services from Black-owned entities. So just to zone in on the outreach intervention.
Sorry, Yvonne. I think that let's say this is the detail of the outreaches that we have done. So I think let's jump this slide.
Okay.
I think the members can go through them on their own. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one. The next one, I think, is the one that relates to the issues of the illegal gambling cases that had been opened and what ultimately happened. That also tells us where the cases are actually closed, and also the other details that we have to go through. But the biggest issue is that this issue of gambling attracts a very small fine when people are actually arrested and all of that. I think that's the point we wanted to make here. So those are some of the cases that have been opened from Q1 to Q4. Let's go to the next one. I think that time is against us. Apologies for that. Let's give the CFO to just deal with this slide in a minute so that we can be able to close the presentation. We know that we have constraints of time. CFO, maybe take over this one for a minute, not more than a minute.
Thank you, CEO. Good morning, Chairperson, members, colleagues. From a financial perspective, overall, the NGB has achieved its 10 consecutive clean audit. Coupled with this is fruitless, wasteful, and irregular expenditure that amounted to 0 over the same 10-year period. Holistically, revenue received and generated amounted to 280 million rand. Expenditure for the financial period 2024-25 was 278 million. We then generated a surplus of approximately 1.92 million rand. We have spent 99% of our expenditure against revenue. In terms of our budget, 100% of our budget was spent. We have paid our creditors within 15 days, and we have managed to collect all revenue that is due and payable to us within a period of 31 days. If we had to have an overview of our expenditure, the analysis will then indicate that 74% of our expenditure goes towards professional fees and consultancy fees. And this is purely based on the fact that the biggest expenditure driver for us relates to our NSAMS operator, which facilitates the collection, monitoring, and management of the LPM revenue that we generate and collect. This is followed by personnel costs at 20% and administrative fees thereafter at 3%. You can move to the next slide, Yvonne, please. With respect to audit findings for the 24-25 financial year, the NGB had one audit finding. This was corrected during the financial audit period. So there's no further action that was required. It related to an immaterial audit adjustment with regard to accounting for credit notes that were actually related to a prior year period. So that has been corrected. There's no further action from the NGB. We can move to the next slide. I can hand back over to my colleagues. Thank you.
All right. Through you, Chair, there are matters that we believe that maybe will require some action in relation to regulation and other aspects. Number one, the issue of the online gambling. The access through the mobile phones and the computers, obviously there is an increase now in relation to illegal gambling. And some of those shifts in technology actually do pose a challenge in the regulation and enforcement, which contribute to compulsive gambling and addiction. So I think that here what we need is that we need a firm policy position that needs to be adopted in order to deal with the issues of the interactive gambling specifically, to make sure that we deal with some of those. What we have seen that a few PLAs, for example, do allow interactive gambling under the pretense of the issue of contingencies. And I think that it's all a demonstration of some of the aspects that we have to deal with in making sure that the legislation is actually adapted to those areas. But as NGB, we've been working in these particular areas of non-compliance and dealing with them direct and working with the PLAs. Obviously, one of the issue points we're making there is that the NGA of 2004 is no longer adequate to respond to the changes in the gambling that are caused by the advance in technology. So consideration around this, we think that's one of the important aspects that we must deal with, obviously through our regulation and other aspects. The next slide, it's going to be the one now on the illegal gambling, where we require increased enforcement in these aspects. So here we've opted to make sure that we work collaboratively with the Provincial Licensing Authority, with the SAPS, as well as FIC banks and other service providers, to assist with the detection as well as the prosecution of illegal gambling in the country, which is dominated mainly by illegal online gambling. I think that is what is dominating the most. So there has been an upsurge of the online gambling, especially online casinos, as you refer to them, which are offered by offshore operators specifically. We identify specifically one jurisdiction here, which is giving us quite a lot of problem, which is, we call it Curacao, which has not been responsive to some of the requests to make sure that there's proper regulation on their side. I think that's one of the challenges we picked up. Now, obviously, we have been doing some work as NGB here to make sure that we engage the Department of Communication to block some of the IP addresses that are giving us illegal gambling. But also we are working with the law enforcement agencies to combat this. But also we are working with Google Africa to make sure that we block the websites as well. And also we have an engagement, we just had an engagement also with ICASA in order to make sure that we deal with the issue of the blocking that is there. So there is a need for the development of a legal framework for online gambling, but also there is a need for a gambling crime to be prioritized as a priority crime. And this work is ongoing with the law enforcement agencies so that it can get the necessary attention in making sure that we actually root out the issue of illegal gambling and the challenges that we face with it. Next slide. The next slide, we deal with the issue of the gambling, proliferation of the gambling advertising, where we are seeing that there's an increase in gambling advertising without sufficient guidelines, which have normalized gambling in society. This obviously fosters harmful gambling habits, but also regulations as well as norms and standards governing gambling advertising are required to ensure that the punters are protected from the negative social consequences of gambling and increased public education on the risks of gambling. So here, the proliferation of gambling and adverts on print media, social media, and billboards, and even government buildings where citizens conduct their normal service. So we have been we've been doing compliance or undertaking compliance oversight visits in the 9 PLAs, where we engaged, we also engaged sports regulators in relation to the issues of advertising, but also we raised concern around this issue with the Advertising Regulatory Board and engaged on social media. So in this issue, we are working quite close with the Advertising Regulatory Board, and there are some of the adverts that may have been taken down because of that particular intervention, because they now know, I think, the requirements in terms of the Act in relation to advertising, because we've been taking them through the expectation. Also, the Google has been assisting in some of the instances. So we need some joint operation here, mainly with the PLAs, to make sure that we pick up these quite quickly and deal with them and nip them in the bud. But what is key is for us to protect the young and the vulnerable by banning the use of persons who appear under 25 in the gambling adverts. The issue here is that those people that are used as the faces of some of these advertisements are actually young people, at least appear to be young, or have a huge following that is actually young. So we need to be dealing with that particular aspect. But also we must tighten the licensing conditions to ensure that age gating, placement checks, and also record keeping, non-compliance must result in fines. We're suggesting about 5% or temporary advertising rights suspension. But we must also reduce the incidental exposure that is on TV, which is the video on demand that you actually see. But we must also make sure that times between 6 to 9 may not be used to do that, because even the younger, the generation, in fact, the young people or the youth that is not supposed to be the target of that are actually getting exposed to those things. But also by requiring the online platform and publishers to implement robust audience verification. That will be very important as we go forward. I'm not going to go through all of them. The next slide quickly. I think the next slide is the issue of the National Gambling Amendment Bill. We know that that one has been to Parliament, and I think that it's still an amendment bill now. It has not been finalized. I think that it would be important for us to look at that bill and finalizing it. It would assist us in one way or the other, at least in relation to the administration, and also to cover the other formats that are not covered. The other aspect is the issue of the exclusion register, self-exclusion register. This one becomes very important in making sure that we can deal with the issue of problem gambling, and people can be able to exclude themselves. But this one will also require us to work closely with the banks to make sure that this is effective, and the other partners to make sure that this is effective. So we are looking at this one. The unlawful winnings, we have done an ex parte application in order to make sure that instead of the lengthy legal proceedings, we can be able to have the forfeiture that automatically goes to NGB, and then we can deal with that without necessarily having to follow a long process in relation to unlawful winnings. I think that would have been the last slide, Yvonne. Yes. Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for taking slightly longer with that. But we thought that we needed to make some of these points. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CEO. With your permission, Chair, I would request that we hand over to the Commissioner at the NLC. Suffice to say that the initial or the final outcomes from an AG point of view indicate an improvement in the financial statements and the audit outcomes, moving from a qualified to unqualified. There are a couple of areas of observations and findings by AG in this regard that relates to issues of material misstatements in the financial statements, irregular expenditure, but which has progressively been reduced and managed over the last few years, as well as consequence management. And I would like to ask the Commissioner to flight her presentation, noting that Chair had given us an hour and 20 minutes. That leaves Commissioner yourself with a little less time than what NGB managed to steal from you, and I apologize on their behalf. Commissioner, over to you. Commissioner, please comment.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honourable members. Thank you, DG, DTIC, Prof. Bachana, members of the board. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to pull up my presentation. If you can just give me a second. Can you see my? Nope. Can you confirm that you can see my presentation?
We can,
Thank you very much.
but it's gone away now.
Is it visible now?
No, it isn't.
Oh gosh. Apologies. Did I just get out of the meeting? No. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we can, but maybe put it on presentation mode.
Thank you. I'm trying. Thank you very much. My presentation is going to follow just the layout of the annual report. I'm just going to give some general stats about where the NLC, the targets. We'll look at some non-financial performance information, governance, internal audit, human capital, PFMA compliance, and then a section on audit outcomes and then financial performance. In terms of our annual highlights, our contributions had increased from 1.8 billion in the 2023-24 financial year to 1.9 billion. We've been able to increase the cash that we've disbursed from 523 million to 988 million. We have been able to, our surplus is currently standing at 4.3 billion rand. Our non-financial performance, our overall performance that we've achieved is 80%. We've been able to enhance our project monitor.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, I'm just intervening here, Chair. I can't get a response to me, but Commissioner, the presentation that is on the screen is not the presentation mode. I think you need to close this and then share again your presentation mode version.
Perfect. There we go, Jody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And so just in terms of
It has disappeared, Jody.
oh gosh. Sorry.
It's back.
Okay, thank you. And so we've also been able to enhance our project monitoring and site visits. Our research-based policy has been approved, and we've been able to look at quite a few critical areas related to funding under the research-based policy. As of March 2025, the procurement for with designated groups amounted to 248 million, which was an increase from 126 million in 2024. In terms of our internal audit and advisory unit, we've been able to successfully complete 79 cases, and 28 were registered with SAPS. In terms of our geographic footprint, we have offices in each of the 9 provinces. I've tried to overlay the number of employees versus the terminals versus the lottery ticket sales per province on this slide. On the right, on the left-hand side of the slide is our vision, mission, and values. And I think it's critically important that I pause here. I'm not going to talk about the vision and mission, but I am going to spend some time about the values, because where we are in terms of the organization, we are looking at morphing into a purpose-driven organization. And so issues around accountability, integrity, and ethical conduct, caring, respect, and excellence embeds the work of the Commission. This is an extract from the AG's report on non-financial performance. If you look at paragraph 17, the AG has indicated that they have not found any material findings on the reported performance information for the selected indicators, and that our annual performance report includes information on the reported achievements against our planned targets and provides explanations for over and underachievement. Our non-financial performance, we've been able to close the 24-25 financial year at a target of 80%. We had 15 targets, we achieved 12, we didn't achieve 3. The 3 that we didn't achieve related to the digital transformation strategy, the timely payments of grants, and then the applications, the percentage of applications adjudicated within 150 days. I can report in terms of the digital transformation strategy, we've been able to conclude the development of the online application system Tutuka, and it is now developed and it's actually in production. Where we are right now is we are busy looking at enhancements to that, because we did pick up a number of areas where we needed to refocus and enhance the system. The timely payments of grants, I think the CFO will also talk to that. We've been able to implement a number of internal controls to mitigate fraud risks in grant funding, and we are working on that, on reducing those timelines going forward as well. The percentage of applications adjudicated within 150 days, we're closely monitoring this. The DTIC, through the Minister, has appointed 10 full-time distributing agency members, and they are seized with adjudication as on a full-time basis. In terms of our regulatory mandate, we have been able to monitor the license conditions. We've looked at 216 illegal lottery cases. There's collaboration with gambling boards, and we've been able to manage the 4th lottery license process. In terms of our grant funding mandates, it's the research-based funding policy that's been approved, the project monitoring and site visits. Key to this also is profiling the good stories, the success stories of NPOs, NPCs who are doing really amazing work across the country, and we've been able to profile 105 of those. We've also been able to allocate over 50% of the research-based funding. In terms of risk management, of enterprise risk management, We manage our risks both at strategic and operational level, and there are some risks that are remaining high. I think one of the big ones is around the fourth operator license, the appointment, and then the transition period. It's the grant funding and the funded projects, whether they are adequately implemented. Some of the other risks that we also manage quite actively is cybersecurity, ICT strategy, modernization, quite a few litigation risks. We are seeing that where we have dismissed individuals from the NLC, they do take us to court, and even up to the SCA. Organizational compliance, these are the NLC's obligations in terms of the laws and regulations of the country. This is something that we have on high watch. Our human capital and the performance internally, and then also the reputation of the NLC. These are our risks that we actively manage on a monthly and a quarterly basis. We report on these to the board. In terms of our enhanced risk management processes, we've been able to institute a whistleblower policy, the code of ethics. We have a politically exposed persons policy, business continuity management policy, and a framework. We're also doing quite a bit of work in terms of anti-bribery, corruption, and fraud. And the Chief Risk Officer, Mr. Mogolani, has assured me that we are ready for external certification. We've done a self-assessment. They've identified 2 areas of non-conformance. We've already attended to those. And so we believe that we are ready for this external certification. And so those processes will unfold during the course of this financial year. The enterprise risk management policy and framework has also been concluded. In terms of strengthening the overall corporate governance within the NLC, the board is the ultimate guardian of good governance within the NLC, and they have effectively set the tone and nature of the work that needs to be performed by the National Lotteries Commission. There are 7 committees which assist the board in the execution of its mandate, and these have been established with their own terms of reference and specific functions. The board, there are six board members, including the chairperson. As the commissioner and members of the executives, we report quarterly to the board on a range of matters, and according to our annual performance plan, our APP, and our 5-year strategic plan. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these just set out very concretely the actions, the separation of powers, the areas of combined assurance between the Chief Audit Executive and the Chief Risk Officer in terms of what constitutes our corporate governance framework and what we've actually done in terms of strengthening this. This just sets out our code of ethics. It details a range of activities that we have put in place to ensure that colleagues within the NLC adhere to this. So things around gifts, requesting to do work outside of the NLC. There's an intensive program on ethics training and awareness. The Chief Risk Officer has gone across the country in terms of sharing what constitutes good ethics and integrity in terms of the way we work within the NLC. And I have spoken to the anti-bribery management system, the ISO 37001. Also a very strong focus internally on consequence management. Non-adherence to policies, I think, is a core focus for us at an operational level in this current financial year. These just set out the functions and responsibility of the Audit and Risk Committee. I'm not going to go into that in any particular detail. This just sets out how we comply with laws and regulations, looking at the National Lotteries Act, the PFMA, PAIA, POPIA. The board then sets the strategic vision and direction for the National Lotteries Commission, the accounting officer, authority, and then our legal and compliance unit in terms of ensuring that there's monitoring and reporting around that on a quarterly basis to the board. In terms of the research-based funding, this has been quite a step change for us within the NLC. The board has identified a number of priority areas: it's food security, youth development, and HIV and AIDS response. So the board has allocated 100 million to counter the gap that the PEPFAR funding has left within South Africa. And we've been able to identify vulnerable children and adolescents in the Northwestern Limpopo. And we are looking at rolling this out throughout the other areas, the other NPOs that have been identified. In terms of food security, here the focus is on small-scale farmers through agri-hubs. It's around agroecology practices, using indigenous crops, looking at nutrition education, community outreach to strengthen food resilience. And then youth development, this is a holistic approach in terms of integrating sports with early childhood development centers, digital labs, primary healthcare facilities, psychosocial support, and then business incubation. All of these are priority areas in terms of our research-based funding, and we'll be reporting on this throughout the coming periods. This is just a snapshot on internal audit. I have mentioned the number of audits that have been completed, the referrals. The SIU has, in last week, extended their proclamation, both in terms of grant funding and very specific procurement activities. The NLC, through internal audit, has already investigated quite a few of those, and those files would then be handed over to the SIU. We've internal audit, through the audits, have been able to identify a number of areas, and I think our audit outcome is a testament to the work that's been done, but there are still some weaknesses, I think, in ICT, finance, grant management, that we've put into a tracker and a plan of a program of work that we are then working to address. The reparations process was started in the previous administration, and it's aimed at healing for those impacted by misconduct. The way in which I think reparations is unfolded is that reparations are a token or a gesture. It's not damages. And I think, you know, there are legal arguments that indicate we need to focus on reparations and not damages. And so this is a process that we are busy with. We said that it could be pecuniary or non-pecuniary, and I'm taking a report to the board at the end of October, which would then start the process, and we're wanting to conclude all of the individuals by the end of Q4 of the 2025-26 financial year, and it will be kickstarted with the submission that I take to the board at the end of October. In terms of our workforce, we are at 75% female representation in top management. However, at senior management, it's a challenge. It's below the 50%. And so we have a number of vacancies that we would then be looking at to ensure that we meet that 50% target. In terms of our disciplinary processes, we've dismissed 4 people in the 24-25 financial year, and one written warning. In terms of our vacancies, we're currently standing at 22%. The board earlier this year had approved a new organogram for the National Lotteries Commission. We are in the process of filling those vacancies, and so we will track this vacancy rate as we migrate into the new structure and bring in some skills that we currently don't have within the organization. This is a slide in terms of learning and development. It sets out the various levels, as well as the amounts and the number of people that have been trained in a range of courses. We see this ramping up significantly in this current financial year, and then going forward as we move into our modernization, as modernization becomes more embedded within the processes and systems of the National Lotteries Commission. I am going to hand over to the CFO just to talk to the next few slides around the audit outcomes.
Thanks, Commissioner. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, DG, Chairperson of the Board, and colleagues. In terms of our audit outcome, I think DG already mentioned this. We have achieved an unqualified audit following 2 years of a qualified audit opinion. Even though it was an unqualified audit, there were some findings that the AG identified. I think we can note key improvements. There have been significant improvement in our internal control environment. We have managed to fix material misstatements, improve performance reporting, and enhance compliance reporting. So if you recall, I think the 22 and 23 and 23-24 financial years, we were qualified on grants. So we had to go back and review close to 3,000 transactions to fix the qualifications over the previous years in the 24-25 financial year. So fixing those errors was quite challenging to review such a significant amount of transactions with the limited capacity within the organization. So there were some errors that were identified by the AGSA, which were classification areas between off-balance sheet and on-balance sheet during the course of the audit, but we managed to pick up all those problems and fix it. And therefore, we were able to achieve the unqualified audit because any material misstatements that was identified by the AG was corrected in the final set of financial statements that was signed off. There was also a compliance paragraph related to expenditure management that the AG raised. And even though the value, I think, was not material because it's a compliance matter, it was raised in the audit report, and this resulted from irregular expenditure. So if you recall, irregular expenditure at the NLC 2-3 years ago was sitting between 500 and 600 million rand. We managed to reduce that to 44 million rand in the previous financial year and 6.8 million in the 24-25 financial year. So there has been significant improvement. Of the 6.8 million that was incurred as irregular or recognized as irregular, 5 million of that related to historical contracts, which we have subsequently fixed, and 1.8 million was a new irregular expenditure identified. Subsequent to the identification of that irregular expenditure, we have further strengthened our SCA policies and our delegation of authority framework to close any gaps that arose or that we picked up. There was also another issue highlighted by the AGSA with regards to a delay in consequence management in relation to fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I think really here the fruitless and wasteful expenditure amounted to 30,000 Rand for the year, coming off the back of 120,000 Rand in the previous financial year. And the reason why there was a delay in the consequence management was because of the resource constraints trying to fix the qualification on the grant matters, that we sort of there was a delay in terms of the timing of implementing this consequence management. But subsequent to the audit report, we have managed to issue all the reimbursement of or acknowledgement of debt to all the staff that were responsible for the traffic fines, because the fruitless and wasteful expenditure related primarily to traffic fines and some interest and penalties on some municipal accounts. That did serve at our loss control committee, and on the municipal accounts there's further investigations that have been recommended that's been handed over to our forensic audit team. But the travel fines has been addressed, and whatever's outstanding is in the process of being addressed. I think what we do want to highlight is our commitment to strengthening governance and financial management practices. I think we work on that every year, and even though we have an unqualified audit, we don't take that for granted. Our aim is to get a clean audit, and all efforts are being made and all hands are on deck to try and achieve that clean audit in the next financial year. On the next slide, we just talked to our material irregularities. So the AG identified 3 material irregularities within the NLC in the 2022, 2023, and 23-24 financial year. So there were no material irregularities identified in the past financial year. But the irregularities identified related to the sports complex that was never delivered, which was Mateo. Payments for the construction of the Dumbe Old Age Home that was not completed, and there was a payment made to professional services firm for the completion of the Dumbe Old Age Home, where construction was never completed. So in the case of the first two, the recovery of the funds is within the purview of the SIU, and that's in progress. And with the Lerumo, that's currently being dealt with by our legal department. I think Lerumo offered for mediation, which is taking a bit longer, but that process is underway. I think the AG has acknowledged the significant work that has been put in by the board and the management of the NLC to address the material irregularities. All of the corrective actions that we have implemented have been audited and confirmed as acceptable by the AGSA. I think the one item other than, or the two items other than the recovery of the funds, which is sort of outside our control at this point in time, is the modernization of the grant environment. And as the Commissioner mentioned, the Tutuka system is now complete. All 7 modules are live. So AGSA would need to come in now and vet that and confirm if they're comfortable with all of the controls applicable from a system perspective, and the embedding of the anti-bribery and corruption framework, which has already been improved and already being introduced and embedded within the organization. It's just for the AG to come in and vet that and confirm that they're comfortable with that process. If we look at our PFMA compliance, I think I've already spoken about this. If we look at the irregular expenditure confirmed for the year, it reduced from 44 million last year to 6.7 million in the current financial year. All previous historical irregular expenditure has been submitted to National Treasury for condonation. So that is currently being reviewed by National Treasury. And on the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, the 35,000 Rand for the current financial year, it has undergone or was in the consequence management process, where some of that consequence management has already been issued and confirmed. In terms of our payment of suppliers, we endeavor to pay all our suppliers within 30 days. For the previous financial year, 96% of suppliers were paid within the 30-day turnaround time. I think currently we're averaging around 17 days for the payment of suppliers. I think where there are suppliers that are paid outside these periods, it's where there are issues on a particular invoice that we need to discuss with the service provider before payment is made. In terms of our financial performance for the 24-25 financial year, our ticket sales increased from 1.83 billion to 1.96 billion. And that is positive because that means the NLC gets a bigger portion of funds from the operator. And this was primarily driven by the major jackpots, the digital channels that the operators use, and marketing efforts. Our operational costs increased from 533 million to 651 million. And the jump in costs is related to the modernization process and the systems and the automation that we have been introducing within the NLC, as well as costs related to the fourth license, the operator license process. Our grant expenditure increased from 545 million in the previous year to 958 million. And if you recall, when we reported 2 years ago, there was a bit of a delay in terms of the issuing of grants because of the controls that needed to be implemented within the organization. So expensing grants of 958 million Rand was a big jump and a positive for us, trying to clear the backlog from the previous financial years. We've also managed to reduce our grant liabilities from 74 million to 44 million Rand, resulting from faster tranche payments. As Commissioner mentioned in the AOPO, even though the tranche payments were over the 60 days, they were still far less than what they were in the previous years, which was 150 days. We're currently sitting at 38 days, so there has been significant improvement in the current financial year to even to pay grants and process grants much quicker. Cash disbursed was 988 million, which increased significantly from the 523 million Rand in the previous financial year, again talking to us being able to allocate and pay grants and clear the backlogs from the previous years. I've already spoken to the irregular expenditure and the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, so I'm not going to touch on that again. In terms of our operating surplus, we achieved an operating surplus of 707 million Rand and an accumulated surplus of 4.3 billion Rand, as mentioned by the Commissioner. Our grants budget, I think, Chair and members, we must highlight, we did underspend by 514 million Rand on the grants budget. I think we were trying to play catch up with the previous year's call and try get those grants out. And that's where you see the disbursements, the cash disbursements of 988 million and the expense of 958 million. But we did have a budget of 1.4 billion. So there was some underspend on the budget. And that was primarily due to the constraints that we had with the distributing agency members. We only had 3 members for the entire year. So we were only able to deal with the backlog as well as the rollout of the new online system. The next few slides, Chair, just talks to the numbers that I've already spoken to. It's just a graphical representation of those numbers. So I'm not going to go into that, Chair. I will then head back to Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair, I think the next set of slides deals with our Q1 performance. We've just included those for the Portfolio Committee, but I think in terms of the instruction and the mandate that we've been given, it was to report on our 24-25 annual report and audit outcome. I am going to ask, Chair, if I may, with your permission, perhaps just to hand over to Prof. Pityana. I'm not sure, Prof, if there's anything on your side that you would like to just share before we hand back over to the chairperson. Thank you. I'm not hearing from Prof. Pityana. So perhaps then I think in conclusion, we've had significant progress in terms of governance and auditing outcomes, including transparency in our grant funding. There's been a much stronger financial stewardship. We've been able to reduce liabilities in grants, I think, as the CFO has explained, and increase revenue through regulatory oversight. A big area of focus for us is on tangible impact and social impacts, jobs, education, funding initiatives that are making an impact, but are also sustainable over the short and medium term. And we are continuing with our digital transformation for stronger regulation and grant funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And with your permission, Chair, would like to hand over back to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, DG. We really tried to manage on time. I will now invite members, Andre, you'll also assist me, who want to engage with the presentations.
Mr. Thring, Chair.
Yes, Member Thring, you're number 1.
Mr. Chance.
Member Chance, you're number 2. Okay, we'll take that for now. We can engage both presentations.
Can I proceed, Chair?
Yes, you may. Please proceed, you are muted. Member Thring, you are muted.
31% problem, gambling prevalence, and a 65.7% gambling prevalence, with some 3 million people reached through awareness and education. So would the NGB then concur that a 31% gambling a problem gambling prevalence is indicative of a possible rise and a challenge that we have in South Africa with this kind of gambling, a problem gambling prevalence that was mentioned. My second question is with regards to a correlation that is between provinces that generate the largest income from gambling. Would one say that that there is a correlation between provinces that generate the largest income from gambling with also having the largest gambling problem prevalence? Then thirdly, Chair, we note that gambling generates a third of income from, it was mentioned, I think it was from personal services. That is quite huge, 1/3 of income in personal services. And I think that there was a comparison that was made also with health, and comparing that actually with health. Are we seeing then an income, an increase in income within the personal services that is actually coming from gambling? And is this a concern? My next question, Chair, is with regards to targets achieved, and it is how does one achieve a 5.5% of the target with regards to investigating illegal gambling? So that's like 94.5% of the target not met. That's a serious concern, where with regards to illegal gambling, you only meet a target of 5.5%. So what kind of mitigating programs are going to be put in place to ensure that the next time we're not going to hear of only 5.5% of the target in terms of investigating illegal gambling has been met? Because this gives the impression that there's actually either no will or desire to address this particular challenge of illegal gambling. Then next, Chair, what was the outcome of the risks and impact of gambling? I didn't hear the report on the outcome of the risks and impact on our socio-economic sectors. So there was some kind of analysis or study that was done, but I did not hear what the outcome was. I'm assuming that it's not a positive outcome. Then, Chair, I think clearly when one looked at the charge sheet, you saw a charge for, I think it was for illegal gambling. There was charges of like 1,000 rand and 1,500 rand admission of guilt fines. I know that some of these illegal gambling outlets will gladly pay 1,000, 1,500 admission guilt fine when compared to the amount of money that they are actually making, which possibly could run into the hundreds of thousands of rands, and a 1,000 or 1,500 admission of guilt fine is minuscule. And so what recommendations or proposals, and I know that this maybe lead to legislative changes in terms of increasing those particular fines, but have recommendations been made with regards to that? Then with the advancement of online gambling, illegal gambling, and gambling advertising, it appears that technology is outpacing legislation as well as enforcement. So, and again, this again refers to possibly the National Gambling Act of 2018. But what legislative recommendations and enforcement measures have been or are mooted or put in place to address this advancement in online illegal and gambling advertising? And I think some mention was made of addressing these challenges via the National Gambling Amendment Bill. And Chair, possibly we may need to look at that National Gambling Amendment Bill of 2018, which is waiting for parliamentary approval. Then, Chair, on the NLC, I want to again just appreciate the work done, having worked in the previous administration and seen the carnage in particular that was perpetrated in the NLC through some of the syndicates that were operating there. I just want to appreciate this kind of report that we are now getting from the NLC in terms of turning the entity around, reducing risk, and strengthening good governance practices at the NLC. So appreciation for this particular presentation. My questions, Chair, then is on the criminal cases. Mrs. Scholes indicated that I think it was there were some 79 cases and about 28 of those cases were closed. Chair, so we dealt with the SIU presentations with the NLC, and I think that the investigations by the NLC was because of the huge scope. It was done in like about 3 tranches, and they uncovered some, I think it was in excess of 1 billion rands worth of, corrupt activity implicating board members, staff, and fraudulent NGOs operating within the sphere of the NLC. So what is the status of those outstanding cases? I know that there were some 79 or so with 28 closed, but what is the status on the remaining cases? Then the mention was made of research-based funding. What is the nature of that? I wasn't exactly sure what it was pertaining to. What is the nature of that research-based funding? Then obviously concern was raised with regards to cybersecurity attacks. And so what security measures are in place to reduce cyber attacks at NLC? Then my last question, Chair, is with regards to performance targets for 2024-2025, and in particular Program 1, referring to building operational excellence, innovation, and agility. 2 out of the 6 targets were not met. That's some 33%, which is a huge percentage of targets that were not met. And the other was 1 out of 3, which referred to returning the NLC to its original mandate. And a simple question on this: what were the reasons for those particular targets not being met? Thank you, Chair.
Member Chance.
Thank you, and if you don't mind, I'm going to keep my video off because I don't have great bandwidth where I am at the moment. But thank you very much to the NGB and the NLC for their presentations. It's appropriate that you are both with us today because you are at the cutting edge of where government institutions, entities interact with the general public in areas which are leading to increasing social stress and addiction, negative consequences to families and individuals. And I think it's extremely important that this is something which the organizations take seriously, and I do get the sense that you are taking it seriously, though perhaps the resources that are at your disposal to address the societal problems themselves need addressing, or at least beefing up. But I think I'd like to say that certainly there has been an improvement in performance, which I think deserves praise in both institutions, although there are still some significant problems. NLC has a real vacancy problem. And of course, the National Gambling Board doesn't exist. The board at least doesn't exist. And we have recently resigned Special Advisor stroke acting CEO, who left under a cloud. So I do have a lot of questions, and I'm just going to sort of go through them fairly quickly. And I understand if many of them you won't be able to answer orally today, but if you could maybe just note them and respond in written form. And some of the questions relate to the presentation, and some of them relate to the more broader issues that both organizations are faced with. Just in relation to the National Gambling Board, there was an investigation into the acquisition of new premises. This wasn't featured in your report, but I know that there was an investigation and the potential for irregular and wasteful expenditure, unauthorized expenditure relating to the previous acting CEO's travel overseas. Has that report been released? And are there any criminal charges likely to be laid against the individual concerned? In regard to the NGB report, do you have an estimate of the scale of illegal gambling, online gambling? I mean, we've seen a massive increase up to 75 billion now of expenditure on gambling and betting. But as Mr. Thring pointed out, only 5.5% of investigations were done, or at least 5.5% of the target investigations were done. How much is actually going on out there that is illegal? Does the NGB have a breakdown of the industry players? Who are major companies? Is there analysis done regarding the companies? How many are unlisted companies? How many are listed companies who are registered overseas, South African companies? And you mentioned the fact that Curacao is the major source of illegal gambling, but there must be a lot of other tax havens where much of this illegal gambling is sourced. Then, of course, it does relate to the legislation. And again, following on from Honourable Thring's comments, it actually goes back to the 2004 National Gambling Act and the 2008 amendments that were never implemented. So what is the department? I'm looking at the department now because they're the purveyors of legislation. What is the department planning on doing to update those pieces of legislation? And I have an interest here because I have a private members bill, the remote gambling bill, which I have put out for public comment and will be hopefully tabling soon. But I will be having discussions around that with the committee chair in due course. Then the question of the taxes and levies, the 5.8 billion rand taxes and levies, does that include corporate income tax? In other words, tax that all companies pay on their profits. Because 5.8 billion doesn't seem a lot if you look at it compared to the 75 billion, which means that these companies are creaming massive profits. You know, one wonders whether these are profits that the state should actually tax more aggressively to obviously then use the money to fund social programs that deal with addiction. That then brings me to the question of the Responsible Gambling Foundation, which is mandated in terms of the National Gambling Act, but only receives a very small levy to address the big problem. I'd like to get the views of the National Gambling Board and the department. Do you think that there is a case for that levy to be increased? Then the National Exclusion Register, has that been set up yet? Does one have access to that? It has been mooted for many, many years, and I don't think, well, I'm not sure, but has it been actually put up for people to scrutinize? Then turning to the National Lottery Commission, again, this wasn't covered in the report, but it's very important because it relates to the SIU investigation. The president has recently extended the proclamation, the SIU's investigation, to include procurement, not just illicit grants. And I have a concern about the fact that the procurement is targeting specific companies, named entities. And if the NLC is aware of any dodgy procurement not included in the proclamation, what do you intend to do about it? Will you be hamstrung from getting law enforcement agencies to investigate dodgy procurement from non-named entities? And I'm thinking, for example, of Nomele Lamola, one of the many law firms that were brought in by the National Lotteries Commission to get involved, or to litigate essentially against many of the whistleblowers at their huge personal cost. And I'm sure that there's a case to be made for many of these law firms to be investigated again for their involvement in that scandal, really, where former employees and current employees were financially compromised by their whistleblowing activities. Then I'm coming to the issue of reparations. I'm extremely concerned about what the Commissioner said, that these will only be finalized by the end of Q4 25-26, which essentially means the end of it, next first quarter of next year, end of March next year. Now that's that's a real blow. That'll be a huge blow to the people who are desperate for their compensation, for their reparations. I mean, we're talking about people who are suicidal in some cases. So I'd like to ask the Commissioner and the Chairperson, please, why is it taking so long? And I mean, the bureaucratic hurdles that you're having to go through to approve a relatively small amount of money, to me, seems like unreasonable. And I'd like to get an explanation for why it is taking so long. And has the Commissioner or the Chairperson had any pushback from other board members or from the Minister or other individuals or entities on these reparations? Why is it that it is taking so long? I just don't understand it. Then on the NLC presentation, I'm very concerned again about the large number of high-risk issues, because in your presentation, I think of the sort of 8 or 10 risk issues, only a couple were medium risk, all the rest were high risk. And I think that must be a source of concern. And what are you doing to try and reduce the risk attached to all those issues? And then my final question is probably not a question that you can answer today. It's more of a philosophical question as to why do you think it is the case that lottery ticket sales amount to 1.96 billion compared to 75 billion for betting and gambling? You know, what is it about betting and gambling that is so much more attractive and alluring? And the fact is that the Lotto was set up to fund worthy causes and NGOs, and is now only generating, you know, like a small fraction, a 30th of what is being generated by gambling and betting. And is there not a case to be made for amending the legislation so that a larger portion or good causes instead of into huge profits for these companies? That's all I have to say for the moment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Andre, is there another hand?
No hands, Chair, at the moment.
Okay. Can the members maybe provide some answers?
Chair, if with the permission of the DG as well as yourself, can I continue for NGB?
Yes, sir.
All right. No, thanks, Chair. I think let me thank the members for the questions. I will take some of questions in the NGB. I think the specific ones that deals with the aspects of research, I will ask Yvonne to take some of those particular questions. But the Honorable Trin raises an issue around the gambling prevalence and the problem gambling, and the issue of that we reached about 3 million people. Now, one of the issues we're trying to deal with in NGB currently is an issue of expanding our education and awareness program and the public education program. And one of those has been on the aspect of the partnerships, understanding the risks that are faced by the various sectors. For example, one of the aspects that we are identifying is that there are some of the recipients of the social grants that are gambling with the money from the social grants. And one of the aspects of the education we've been doing has been working more with SASSA to make sure that we are able to reach out in relation to making sure that we deal with the challenges of gambling that we are finding in that specific industry. The other one is around the issue of the students that may also be gambling specifically online. In this aspect, we're working a lot with the other universities, and we are aiming to work more with NSFAS as well as a Department of Higher Education in this instance. Just this week, we had a team, or we still have a team that is in the Eastern Cape, and that team is working together with the Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha, but also they are working with some of the TVET colleges around with the Eastern Cape gambling agency there, to make sure that we are together in addressing some of these challenges that we're facing. Certainly, one of the challenges we have as the NGB is an issue of the capacity internally. Because if you look at the structure that we have as an organization, there's one or two people that are looking at this specific issue. So we're looking for these collaborations with a view to make sure that we make it to be more effective given the number of the resources that we have internally. Hopefully, what we're actually hoping for when the board comes in, we'll have a review of the structure to make sure that we capacitate more on those specific areas. So there is ongoing programs which are targeting the specific groups that you may regard as vulnerable in terms of the gambling and the prevalence of the gambling. Yvonne will deal with the issue of the study itself in relation to the 31%, as well as the issue of the 65 prevalence percent. The issue around the 5.5% of the unlawful winnings. Now, on that issue, Honorable Trin, one of the issues there that we identified is that in most cases there was incomplete information that we actually had, because we are given some of the unlawful winnings, but we have to investigate, and when you have to investigate, you have to locate the person that has actually won that money, which is in your account. And then after that, you have to do the investigation with all of the necessary agencies, maybe the banks and the others that may actually be there. In this specific instance, one of the biggest gaps we identified is that there has been an issue of us not working as closely with the banks per se, which creates a huge challenge for the financial institutions. Now, what then happened is that you will have incomplete information. In our strategy session that we held about a month ago, one of the areas we identified was those kinds of collaboration with the banks, and there's work that is going on currently with the Reserve Bank, with a view to make sure that all of those unlawful winnings were able to get more information that is going to enable us to have a higher success rate. We have identified a few other partners that we'll be working with here, including the law enforcement agencies. So certainly, on the side of the commitment, there's commitment to it. In terms of the interventions, we have identified the interventions that are going to make us to be more effective on this one. By the way, some of the cases that may have been on the other 95% are cases that may have, I think the prescription period of 5 years may have been passed at the time we actually received the thing. So we couldn't be able to deal with them in that instance. So it's a combination of factors here. But one of the big factors is the collaboration with the law enforcement agencies, including the issues of the banks, which we are working on. I think we are working on a draft MOA now with the Reserve Bank in order to make sure that we address some of the challenges that has been identified. So we're working on that specific aspect. In relation to illegal gambling and the arrests and the fine issues that we were talking to, Chair, if you will realize, is that we are making a specific proposal, and that proposal is that illegal gambling needs to be identified as one of the priority crimes. Because when you identify it as one of the priority crimes, then it's going to be able to attract quite heavy fines and possible a jail time for people. And that is when they are going to see the importance of this aspect. One of the areas we identified at the end that need intervention in our presentation is exactly this particular issue, where we are proposing that it must be a priority crime. As it is now, some of the colleagues are sitting in some of the criminal cluster or justice cluster to deal with some of these specific issues, to make sure that there's an understanding, but also there is a commitment to deal with some of these issues and designate this as part of the priority crimes that would actually have. We believe that is going to assist in making sure that we deal with this. But as you have suggested, it may need an amendment of the legislation in dealing with some of these specific issues. The issue around the technology that is outpacing legislation and whether there are measures in place, I think that here, as we have indicated, this issue of the technology and the online gambling is a huge challenge. And it has proven that it's not only a huge challenge for South Africa only, it's a biggest challenge, I think, that in the world. I think one of the articles I was looking at some point was actually indicating that about 70% of the market, I think, in the European countries may have been taken by illegal gambling, and that illegal was in the form of the online. So there is a real challenge in relation to the issue of the online gambling and the requirement or the importance of amending our legislation to accommodate this aspect of online. I think it's something that is a challenge. But on our side, one of those things that we had identified is one of the things that I was saying, we are working with the Reserve Bank to identify where people may have won illegally. And now, if we're saying illegally, it means that you won from an illegal or unlicensed operator, which then we take over those funds and make sure that we designate them as unlawful winnings. That's one intervention. On the other side, we are constantly working with the PLAs on this one to make sure that we both enforce and make sure that there is identification where there are these illegal operators that are actually operating in the space. And the other aspect, we mentioned the work that we're doing with Google and the other internet service providers to make sure that we block these ones. Those are only interim measures. At the end of the day, we need a proper intervention in the form of regulation reform that is going to take into account the technology that is actually coming. So I think that there is work that is being done by NGB, but I think that there is a need for a regulatory reform in this aspect. I think Honorable Chance raises an issue that I think that the DTIC in the form of the DG may deal with the issue of the acquisition of the building and the forensic audit on it. But in relation to the tax and the levies, I will ask Yvonne to deal with that issue. The Responsible Gambling Foundation. Now, if you look at the Responsible Gambling Foundation, part of their sources of revenue is actually from the operators, which is a license condition, but I think that it has been more on a voluntary basis to contribute. They are all contributing in this sense, except for one that is not contributing, that we know that it's not contributing. I have raised that matter in my meetings with the CEO of the concerned PLA about that operator. And there's going to be a discussion between myself, the CEO of the Responsible Gambling Board, and also the CEO of that PLA to make sure that that money is there. Because the complaint from the Responsible Gambling Foundation has been that that operator not operating, is not contributing, is actually creating some strain in relation to the resources that they are actually have in their disposal, and it needs to basically come up. I don't think that there would be in fact, we do believe that there is a necessity perhaps to relook at the contribution to make sure that the Responsible Gambling Foundation is actually supported and given a little bit of more resources. Because some of the work that we are unable to do in terms of education, we work more closely with the Responsible Gambling Foundation. We are going to be renewing our MOU with them and working with them. We'll be together in the Gambling Summit, the Responsible Gambling Summit, that will be held in the next month. So in a sense, there is a very great relevance that we can attach to the Responsible Gambling Foundation, its mandate, and specifically around the issues of the after effects of gambling, but also the education aspect, because they are able to reach more of the people that we are. So we do have joint programs with them in terms of education, and we do have relations with them in terms of the mandates that we have. So I think it would assist greatly to make sure that we strengthen the kind of the muscle that they have resource-wise to assist to implement their own mandate. The exclusion register, Chair, I think that that's one of our issues. Currently, we don't have an exclusion register. We know that that had been gazetted with a view to make sure that it actually comes into law at a certain point. So at this stage, we still don't have it. We are waiting, I think, for the feedback on it to make sure that we'll be able to implement, because it's one of the biggest issues that the industry has been raising and the PLAs have been raising, to say that we must be able to have that exclusion register. it can assist us greatly in making sure that there is we can be able to block some of those self-excluding individuals who no longer want to participate in gambling, but cannot do that because they are being enticed into doing some of those. But that exclusion register will also need a lot of collaboration. It will need the banking sector because for gambling, they are using the cards. So for you to actually make sure that it actually works, you will need a lot of collaboration between the banking sector and the other related sectors that are dealing with the issue of the cards in this specific instance. So that can become an effective instrument that can assist us in dealing with the challenges of gambling. So we don't have it yet, so it's not being implemented as it is at this particular point. I will now allow Yvonne to take some of the questions in relation to the survey.
Thank you, Lungile. Through you, Chair. Honorable Thring, I think your question was in relation to whether there is a correlation between the problem gambling prevalence we are experiencing, the prevalence, overall national prevalence that we're experiencing. So what we can observe is that there is no correlation. So what we're saying here is that as much as there's two provinces mainly driving the performance of the industry by way of generation of the gross gambling revenue, which is Mpumalanga and Western Cape, the actual prevalence. So through our study on the socioeconomic impact of gambling, a question was asked to respondents, have you gambled in the last 12 months from that date of being asked the question? And if they answered yes, then that would give us an indication of the level of prevalence of gambling. So when we look at those statistics, certainly it is not the provinces Mpumalanga and Western Cape that have the highest prevalence, but in fact, it is KZN, Northern Cape, and the Free State that have the highest prevalence, ranging between 77% and 79%. And this simply points out to the fact that the people that are engaging in gambling are essentially based in provinces outside the provinces that are actually generating the income. So it's more online betting with operators that are registered or licensed with Mpumalanga and Western Cape, but then the punters are then situated in a different province. Now, this also, sort of corroborates the problem gambling, prevalence, where we then see that it is exactly these provinces, Free State, KZN, and also Gauteng, that have shown the highest problem gambling prevalence. So again, the problems of gambling being experienced in provinces outside the provinces that are actually generating most of the income. So certainly there's no correlation in terms of the largest income generating provinces and also these problems and prevalences. The 1/3 income generated from gambling when we compare to other sectors, certainly what it's showing us is that, gambling and betting are on the rise. And definitely the data that we collect is certainly supporting this, as well as the Stats SA survey, household survey that looked at personal services. Also confirmed the same, especially that of the top 10 activities that make up the personal services, it is bookmaking and online gambling that essentially was the number one generator of income. And even when we move down the 10 activities, we also find gambling on slot machines. So this is more gambling that's happening within the casino or the LPM industry, as well as the bingo. So certainly gambling has become, that 1/3 is definitely corroborated. I think the other question was in, Lungile would have covered, but in terms of Honorable Chance, I think you had asked in terms of our estimate of online gambling. So currently, because it's illegal, we don't have any way of measuring it, except getting a sense of its magnitude through a disaggregation of the online betting mode of gambling. The NGB collects data on 6 provinces specifically that have broken down the data between online betting and retail betting. And so it's online betting that accounts for 60% of that total 75 billion, which is about 47.1 billion. So that is just showing us the amount of online sort of activity that's taking place, or at least but at this point, we can't really estimate the actual magnitude of that online gambling. Then in terms of the taxes and levies, the 5.8 billion is specifically derived out of gross gambling revenue, which would be similar to gross profit. So it is not including corporate income, that would be separate. So that 5.8 billion is purely from the GGR. And then I also just wanted to add also on the online gambling, Honorable Chance, what we do have a sense of is the extent of prevalence when it comes to unlicensed or illegal gambling. So through our survey or research, we were able to determine that about 57%, or at least of the sample, had indicated having participated in an unlicensed gambling activity or illegal gambling activity, which also includes the online element of gambling. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I think that we leave our response there. Thanks very much.
Chair, Mr. Gama raised his hand, Chair. I don't know if you want to take that or continue with the NLC.
Okay, let's allow Mr. Honorable Gama, and then the NLC will come in.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Mine is really just to deal with what I believe are the residual matters in terms of the questions that have been asked by the honorable members. Just the first one, in terms of the legislation or the regulatory measures which need to be put into place to operationalize the self-exclusion register. And you're saying it's delayed, but in whose interest is it to continue to delay the exclusion? Because I believe that this is a matter that is wholly and completely within government's control. So why can we not make sure that this is actually accelerated and that there's no, we do not delay this any further? And then just to pick up on the proliferation of illegal gambling, I note your response on the 5.5% of the targeted cases. And I guess it's a bit of a complex matter as it is. But the admission of guilt fines, which range between 500 Rand to 1,500 Rand, I think they are wholly inappropriate. Probably they need to be increased exponentially. And I don't know to what extent you can play a role in making sure that in as far as admission of guilt fines on illegal gambling, we can change the laws and we look at amounts of 100,000 plus, because you need to have something that actually caps, and make sure that people do not want to be found guilty of those laws. And then finally, on the Curacao, you're saying you're working with a number of people like ICASA, etc., to try and close down these things. Why can't you just simply shut them down online? Without needing to go to all of these places. What kind of do you need permission from anyone to shut them down and make sure that they don't do anything? Because if they're illegal, they're illegal. I don't understand, why illegal casino operators can be allowed to continue to do this. But I think all in all, probably going forward is the changing of the legal framework, the changing of the existing acts, which are no longer relevant for the times that we live in. But how fast can you finalize the legal framework to amend 2004 and the 2018 Act so that we could then be in a position to have a proper legal framework for online gambling, but also to prioritize gambling crime? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can go back to NLC, and then you'll come back for the other questions.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. While I am accountable for the performance of the National Lotteries Commission, I'm supported by a team and I have them here with me. Mr. Vincent Jones is going to answer the criminal cases and the SIU and the entities one, and then the rest of the team will come in on other questions as well. I'll hand over to Mr. Jones.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chair and members, Minister, and all protocols observed. In respect of members' things, a question about the SIU cases and the current state of those cases. So I think it's important to explain that the SIU's mandate and proclamation covered cases, all grant funding cases up to November 2020. And all those cases that we had on our NLC forensic register was then referred to the SIU, and we have meetings with them where we get an update and where we share information. To date, we have shared another 87 project files or requests with the SIU from the NLC. In terms of other cases which we received after the November 2020 that does not fall within the proclamation period at that time, the status currently for those financial years, we had a total of 487 cases where we have completed 314 investigations. 57 was in progress as at this today, and then 116 is still going through our risk prioritization allocation, and we're going to do preliminary reviews in respect of those. So these cases with the SIU, which they reported on, is at various stages. Some are still in investigation, some has been referred for preservation of assets, and the SIU would be best placed to provide an update to the portfolio committee in respect of the outstanding matters that they are dealing with. And then to answer the Honourable Chancellor's question about the recent extension of the SIU proclamation. So one of the areas that will be investigated, or which is included in the extended proclamation, is the appointment of a panel of attorneys and firms and legal practitioners. And this definitely includes the two firms which was mentioned, Ndobela Lamola as well as Maluleke Inc. Before the NLC received this extended proclamation on the 10th of October, the internal Forensic Investigations Unit have conducted some of these investigations into procurement transactions. One particular example is the the investigation into the flash mob. And that investigation was completed. We have opened a criminal case as well. So in many of these matters listed, we will share all the work that has been done with the SIU. And your question was that what if there is an SEM matter that is not included in this list? The NLC has an established forensic services panel, which includes 10 firms, which we can outsource matters to. We also have in-house investigation capacity of 6 investigators that investigate various allegations received either via the whistleblower hotline or management. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vincent. My name is Poppy Shabalala. I'm the CIO at NLC, started 3 months ago. I will address the question on cyber attacks and what do we have in place on that one. I think it's an important question, and thank you for asking it, because we now have our new online system for grant management system hosted in the cloud. And as much as there are benefits and all efficiencies that comes with hosting in the cloud, it makes us all to be much more vigilant around the issues of cybersecurity. Our internal audit is constantly doing audits. With every audit, they'll always plug in security to make sure that we are secured. And it's good to report that we haven't had any cyber attacks in this financial year, and we're trying to keep it that way. In terms of access control, we have what we call multi-factor authentication. That is not only your password that you authenticate with, you can also use all other means in terms of authentication, like using your fingers, and in other instances, we even have facial recognition to make sure that there is that. And then when we do our OTPs as well, we use multimedias so that it's not only one area where you can know that you can get an OTP and also bypass, especially because we're using a lot of the OTPs in the Tutuka system. Another thing that I want to mention is that the biggest part of a gap around security is social engineering, because you find that when you have got the technical part covered, then the weakest link is your employees on their understanding and their vigilance around cybersecurity. So we constantly do what we call phishing simulations to the team, where we will simulate a message that, and then afterwards, then we check who opened the link or who shared the link. And based on that, we're not only just reporting on it, we also then develop targeted training to make sure that our employees are kept abreast. We constantly scan our environment for vulnerability exposure as well, not only just relying on the audit. And we do our vulnerability scans on both our network that is on the premises and as well as the ones on the cloud, using solutions like Microsoft Defender, because we are hosted on the Microsoft Azure. What we also do is that on the legacy systems, because we do have systems that are outdated and some of them are not supported anymore, we have taken an initiative of engaging the OEMs to make sure that we are not leaving those systems opening a gap for vulnerability, because when you have a system that is not used often or is hardly used, then the hackers are using that system because they know that you might not pick it up because it's not an active system. So we're making sure that we close those as well. And lastly is to say we have recently appointed a cybersecurity specialist that is also ensuring that as on this journey of securing NLC, we are doing it in a professional way. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee and members, all protocol observed. My name is Anashni Maharaj Doman, and I'm the Senior Manager, Corporate Performance and Monitoring. Honorable Thring, I beg your pardon, in response to your question with regards to performance in relation to the AOPO, I think at the outset, yes, the NLC for the 24-25 financial year had 15 targets on their APP, disaggregated as follows. 6 indicators in Program 1. As you alluded to, the purpose of Program 1 is administration and business support, which we encapsulate under the outcome of building operational excellence and agility. And then we've got 3 indicators in Program 2, which is our regulatory compliance program, with the outcome of returning NLC to its core mandate of regulatory compliance and reinstating its credibility. And then our last program is our other core mandate, which is grant funding. And we had 6 indicators in that program as well. So yes, in Program 1, out of the 6, 2 were not achieved. And of those 2 indicators, that related to Indicator 4, which was Phase 3 of the digital transformation strategy. Our reason for not achieving it is because modules 4 and 5 were supposed to have gone live by the 31st of March. But as Commissioner Scholz has already alluded to in the earlier presentation, that target has gained significant traction. And in fact, that entire Tutuka system is now online, wherein we've now modules 1 to 7 are now live, meaning that they are in production. So whilst we didn't make it by the 31st of March, that has already been accelerated to the extent that modules 1 to 7 have already gone online, and that too before the envisaged completion time. The other target related to the turnaround time in payments, and that unfortunately is predominantly because of the backlog of payments emanating from the 23-24 cycle. And I think above everything else, the additional internal controls that were brought in to mitigate against fraud and other risks identified once payment was released. Amongst these, some of the internal controls brought in was ensuring that all of the organizations actually have a valid tax compliance certificate before payment can be released, including the supplementation of affidavits from those persons responsible for the banking accounts at the end of the day. So those were just internal controls brought in within the 24-25 financial year. What I can report is already in Q1, we have demonstrated a 20% overachievement on this particular target. And very recently, even in terms of Q2, there's an 11% overachievement in terms of making sure that payments are indeed made within the 60-day regulated timeline. With regards to Program 2, that relates to regulatory compliance, all 3 indicators were achieved in that area. And then in Program 3, out of the 6, the one that was not achieved relates to the 150 days target. Notwithstanding that our call only opened in December, and of course we did have capacity constraints as far as the distributing agency members were concerned. That is unfortunately the primary reason for not having achieved the 150 day target, which essentially then brings us back to the 80% out of the 15, those 3 not being achieved, with having 12 of the purported targets achieved at the end of the financial year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anash. Chairperson, honorable members, my name is Aaron Mulemo, the Chief Risk Officer here at the NLC. So I will be taking a question or providing answers on the question that was asked on the risks themselves as to why are they high and what are we doing about it. So, Chairperson, I think we need to appreciate that when it comes to risk assessment, we cannot afford to underrate or to under-assess the risk. So our risk outcome is based mostly on the risk events that took place, is based on the risk management tolerance framework, which indicates which risks fall outside the appetite and the tolerance levels that were approved by the board. But over and above that, since internal auditing is implementing the risk-based internal audit plan, we need to make sure that we take the internal audit as well as the external audit's findings whenever we discuss the risks themselves. That will also inform how the risk is actually pitched at the residual level, and then obviously coupled by a number of events that would have taken place. So you look at grant funding risk. We did have challenges with capacity of the distribution agencies. And then that led to non-achievement of the legislated turnaround times of 150 days, as well as the dispensing of grants within particular point of time, as alluded by Anash. However, we are seeing traction now because we do have DAs that have been appointed, and the synchronization of the DAs have taken place whereby they've been broken into 3 groups so that we can adopt a more targeted approach so that we can expedite the adjudications. And then also the controls that have been bought by the modernization or the Tutuka system, as we call it, have also starting to yield results. And then we are continuing to monitor this risk. For now, yes, it's still high, but then we envisage that it will change because we're starting to see traction. Cybersecurity risk, it is high because we are handling a lot of information, and then there are deficiencies that have been identified also from both internal and external audit, and also our assessment from the NIST assessment, as well as the ISO 27000, which speaks to cybersecurity, has also indicated some deficiencies. But then the CIO has developed a plan to deal with those gaps, and then we are monitoring this together with the ICT strategy risk, which are actually reported to the ICT steering committee. I must also point out that all these risks are receiving ample attention from various lines of defense in line with our combined assurance framework in the organization. The reputation risk will remain high, Chairperson, because there is a lot of negative publicity around the NLC, even though we can implement the revitalization brand strategies and the communication strategies. For as long as we have issues out there, the impact on the reputation of the organization. But then we do manage this in line with the key risk indicators that we have identified, but then we'll be monitoring this as well. The issue around litigation, there are cases in the courts. Some of the cases have been concluded. The judgments are for the NLC, some are against the NLC. But the issue here is the number of cases. I think it's 3 litigation cases against the NLC, which relates to the operating license. So up until those matters are concluded, this risk will remain. Human capital risk, this was the issue around the structure, because you remember that this picture is portrayed at the end of the financial year, whereby at the time the structure was in a consultation process, but it was subsequently approved in the new financial year. So now we have prioritized the critical positions to make sure that we fill the structure to augment the capacity to fulfill the mandate. Issues around performance management compliance has been an issue, but we have seen increase in terms of compliance management with the performance management performance cycle. And then again, issues of people, ethical issues. We do have those issues which we are managing through the implementation of the ethics and morality plan, which has been implemented and monitored by the Social and Ethics Committee of the board. So, Chairperson, I'd like to end here, but also stipulate that this is the picture as it was at the end of the year, and which relates to the annual report. There is a change in the picture. However, the litigation and the reputation risk, I think they will remain high for a particular point of time. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Members, all protocol observed. I am Dintswalo Nkuna, the Executive for Regulatory Compliance. With the question that was asked on lottery ticket sales, that they are quite minimal, compared to revenue that is generated from gambling. The reason being that we are also facing a similar challenge as the gambling sector, as alluded to by Mr. Dukwana, of illegal online lotteries, which are lotteries that are registered in other jurisdictions. These are provided online, marketed to South Africans, and we deem those lotteries to be contravening the Lotteries Act. As a result of that, there is quite a prevalence in members of the public playing those illegal lotteries because of their higher payouts. The same goes for gambling activities. Currently, there is a provision in the gambling legislation that allows contingencies to be used for taking bets. And with the outcome of results of the National Lottery Games, there is betting that takes place on the outcome of those offered by licensed bookmakers who are licensed by provincial licensing authorities. Mainly, the national lotteries or the National Lottery in South Africa was established to generate revenue for worthy good causes. In addition to that, it needs to strike a balance with preventing excessive play, problem gambling, and preventing underage play. With the license agreement, it requires a contribution of a minimum of 25% of ticket sales that goes towards good causes funding, a minimum of around 45% that gets paid out in prizes. Now, if you compare the 45% average prize payout from the National Lottery, that is considered far less to the above 80% payout that is returned to punters through gambling. And that is the main reason where, as much as the National Lottery was established in South Africa to have no competition, that there be only one license issued for the operation of the license for the National Lottery. There's a number of licensed bookmakers across all the provinces that are operating licensed to take bets on the outcome of the National Lottery. And this is where the competition element comes into play. So apart from illegal gambling, illegal lotteries, which are generating quite huge payouts and promising, and I'm using that word intentionally, promising to pay out large winnings to persons who participate in those illegal activities. And from the NLC side, through our education and awareness, and as part of our mandate to protect members of the public, we also do awareness on illegal lotteries. However, because of the attractiveness of the prizes that are being promoted by illegal operators, there is quite an attraction for members of the public to participate in those activities. The last thing on their mind is to check whether those activities are legalized in South Africa for the National Lottery or even in the gambling sector. What players are interested in is how much do they win. And that is the reason why with lotteries, it's probably around 10% from the last research, generates about 10% of the gross gambling revenue that is generated from gambling activities, as it was reported to earlier. Our efforts still remain to ensure that we sustain the proceeds for the National Lottery and continue to promote the lotteries as legalized lotteries and demonstrate through the good causes that the Commissioner was referring to, that we also showcase that apart from persons winning in the National Lottery, there's also a return to good causes through community development projects that are funded through the NLDTF. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and members.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members. I think I just want to wrap up on three last points. Honorable Thring, you asked a question about the nature of research-based funding. We funded 100 million to step up the PEPFAR funding gap to a number of institutions in that space. So it was for HIV/AIDS, there's food security, there's youth employment, amongst others. There's also GBV. Those are what the board has then identified as the priority research areas to be funded. And so as and when we do some research, the Act also allows for the minister to indicate areas of research. We then do that research, or we get research partners who can assist us, and we put a submission together forward to the board. Honourable Chance, I want to respond on the reparations. I think our challenge is that we are probably the first entity who's making reparations without a commission of inquiries report to guide us. And so some of the legal questions that we've had to go back and revisit recently has been around whether the Lotteries Act actually gives us the powers to do this. And I think the caution has come in that we don't want to be fixing one problem and creating others. And so I do accept, and we have been in touch with the whistleblowers and keeping them informed about the process. I did indicate earlier that I will be taking a submission. So we've split the process. I want to conclude the former and current staff as one category by the end of the financial year. So I'll be taking this in piecemeal to the board now in October and then in January. So there would be some names and some individuals that we'll take in October, and then the others we will take in January. And then hopefully by then we'd be able to conclude this process. I also just want to indicate that in terms of our vacancies, it is standing at 22%. However, we are in the process of migrating to a new structure. And so what we need to do is we need to place all of the current colleagues into the new structure as a first port of call before we can actually go out and look at some of the let me say, easier to fill vacancies. We have, as a management team, prioritized a list of positions which would be advertising in the short term. These are in ICT, in finance. I think there's some in the risk area, some in corporate services. And so these are positions that we'll advertise internally and externally because these are skills that we actually currently desperately need. Chair and honourable members, I think those are all of the questions that I've noted down for the NLC. Thank you. I'll hand back over to you. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chance has raised his hands, Chair.
Yes, Member Chance.
Thank you very much, Chair. There's just something else I want to touch on. As I mentioned, it's useful that we've got the NLC and the NGB in the same meeting, because I want to just recall the Gambling Review Commission in 2010 recommended that the institutions should be one entity with a strong enforcement capability. If I recall correctly, the NEA and the NCOP both agreed to this, but the DTI, as it was then, over the years has objected. So I'd like to get the input from both institutions as well as the Director General, who he may not have the institutional memory, but there may be other people in the meeting who do. And is it not the case that the environment has changed so dramatically in the last 10 years that we've heard today is the case, that there could be a good cause for having one entity, and that the legislation should be amended to achieve that? Thank you.
No, Mr. Chance, I think that question will be unfair to ask the employees of government, because that's a policy decision. So I don't think anyone must attempt to answer it. And then firstly, but secondly, if there is a report, we have a capacity to rehash it from Parliament, to relook into it, so that we have a policy discussion around it. I think that question for now will not help us to deal with issues of the annual reports. I just wanted to make these comments because I think members have commented.
Chair,
that first. Yes.
Apologies, Chair. Professor Petiana raised his hand, Chair. I don't know you want to take him before you make your concluding remark, Chair.
Okay. Yes, Prof.
And Ms. Webster.
Okay, Ms. Webster first, and then Prof will follow.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable members. Really, for me, it's just to apologise that I got my technology foxing me this morning, and so I didn't actually get to make the presentation that I meant to make. I really want to say that it will, in fact, be submitted to the portfolio committee in the normal manner. And really, that's all I want to say. And beyond that, just to commend the report that has been presented by the commissioner to the portfolio committee in the usual manner as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Member Webster.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for the presentations. I think a lot of what I would have asked has been covered by the colleagues, and the responses have been helpful in getting just a broader understanding of what is happening in the NLC, having gone through the annual reports. I think that I mean, there are some which we could look at as solid achievements across some of the targets, but there are still very serious institutional governance deficits that we've constantly raised as a committee and that we've warned about. And I think to then within our own period of serving as the seventh parliament and in this committee, still being seeing that some of these issues are here is actually quite concerning. I think the issues which I would want further clarity on from my side is, you know, there was this flagging of the 6.8 million in irregular expenditure and material misstatements. And I wanted to have a sense of the consequence management steps that have been taken, particularly at the senior and board levels in response to specifically those audit findings, and basically also what is being done to enhance internal audits, oversight, and governance. And I know we keep talking about a new system, but it can't be that alone that is going to address some of the issues that have been found. And then my second question is around when you looked at the regulatory program, and it says managing the fourth license process is fully achieved. And I'd just like a sense of how this was defined when it comes to this particular report. Was it just about procedural completion, or was it actually saying that there's a validation of the integrity of the process from an internal perspective? I mean, we've engaged on various processes of looking at the integrity of the process ourselves as Parliament, but I want to get a sense from internally. What is the definition of that achievement? Was it just merely speaking to the procedural completion, or are you engaged or addressing the integrity of the process as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we maybe have those questions responded to? I think it's NLC in the main.
Chair, thank you very much. I'm going to ask the CFO to assist in talking about the irregular expenditure and the material misstatements. I think she has already alluded to that in a presentation. And then I'm not sure, Chair, if I'll ask Tintswalo to come in on the targets and the achievements in terms of the fourth license. And then the Chair may also want to weigh in terms of the integrity of the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Thanks, Honorable Webster, for your questions. In terms of the material misstatements on the financial statements, there were errors. They were really human errors. So there were some omissions on the notes that didn't pull through on the final PDF version. And in addition to that, there was an error that was identified when correcting the previous year qualifications. So it's classification errors between the balance sheet and off balance sheet. So basically liabilities and contingent liabilities that needed to be fixed. But as I said, I think all of these errors were picked up and they were corrected before we signed off the financial statements. With regards to the irregular expenditure and the 6.8 million in particular, 1.8 million of which is new irregular and the rest relating to historical contracts. I think some of that consequence management is still underway. I think, you know, it depends on, so we have an established loss control committee within the organization, which looks at all of the evidence related to each irregular expenditure identified. And the appropriate consequence management is recommended based on the severity of the allegations. I think it's important to highlight that in all of these cases, there was no financial loss to the NLC. It was because somebody failed to comply with the delegation of authority. So they signed something that was ran over their approval limit, or the contract had a set value and somebody overspent on that contract value because it wasn't being monitored correctly. So there was no financial loss. But having said that, I think the consequence management is something that we've been embedding in the organization. And based on the reports that we do receive from the forensic investigation team, where it's investigated externally, or the reports that are done by the internal audit team, where it's an internal issue, we then take the appropriate consequence management according to our disciplinary code. In some instances, we've issued corrective counseling. Some there's been written warnings, some final written warnings, some there's disciplinary processes. Some individuals have resigned before those disciplinary processes could be undertaken. So there has been various degrees of consequence management relating to the specific reason for that irregular expenditure. Thanks.
I'm just, Ms. Tintswalo Nkuna is just going to talk about the targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning once again, Honorable Chairperson and members. With regards to the annual performance plan target for the previous financial year on managing the fourth license process, that was developed having considered provisions of Section 13 of the Lotteries Act, which states that the minister, in consultation with the board of the NLC, will issue a request for proposals to commence with the licensing process. As part of the NLC responsibilities, we're responsible to draft the request for proposal, come up with a project plan that needed to be monitored on the timelines that were included in the request for proposal that was issued to the prospective bidders for the fourth license, including that started in 2023 with the issue of the RFP, the briefing session, and also with the receipt of the bids in February of 2024, proper registration, documentation thereof, and also ensuring that we adhere to the project plan, but most importantly, that this licensing process is aligned to the provisions of the Lotteries Act, which included the receipt of applications, evaluation and adjudication, quality assurance of the processes, which led to the subsequent submission of the reports to the minister for his consideration. So from the NLC side, we were providing support on the licensing process in line with the request for proposals, the project plan, and also providing information as and when required by the evaluation or adjudication committee, as well as the quality assurance teams that were appointed to better understand the provisions of the Act, the previous licenses, how they were operating, and so forth. So mainly this was procedural matters that the NLC was responsible for in support of the fourth licensing process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes our management response.
No, thank you very much. I think firstly, at the level of the Gambling Board, I think we must commend the 10th clean audit as an issue, and then maybe commit to deal with this issue of the online gambling, which is causing problem. And the colleagues will remember that we were working on the amendments, and then because of the budget 3.0, so we could not proceed. So we might need to sit down as members of parliament to relook into the new proposals that are going to deal with the amendments regarding Section 11 on the interactive gaming issue, and also the issues of advertising in the sector, even beyond the the actual places where this gambling are taking place, I think is one issue that we'll need to look at. The issue of the governance is one area that we are still concerned about. So I think I note that the DG says that the issue of the board is almost concluding. So would like that issue to be concluded as soon as possible, including the appointment of the permanent CEO so that there's stability in the institution. Now, I just want to raise one issue, DG, just in general. So when you came in, as an example, we welcomed you as the portfolio committee because we are an important stakeholder. We're always working with you. So we must also, when people exit in the institutions, those that are dealing with the institution, we need to know. For instance, we know that the former administrator is no longer there, but we were never furnished with even a decent letter that the person is gone, even if there were no reasons. So as the resignation of Prof, which we saw on the media, which as a portfolio committee we were never told. So would like to emphasize this point that it will be critical that the people that interact with the portfolio committee, when they come in and when they exit, there is a systematic way in which we are informed. We don't read about them on the newspapers. Where the NLC chairperson is appointed by ourselves through a parliamentary process. So it will be important that we get to know, not just to come across the advert and then we're told what process to follow. I think it's one issue of principle that we wanted to raise. With regard to the NLC, I think we must also note the improvement on the audit outcomes and encourage them to really do the best, because the first step to cleanse the institution of its image is to deal with these rampant issues that have been taking place there. And I think that there is a very clear record now that there is a considerable improvement that is taking place, which we commend. Secondly, on the dismissals, I think one of the members also raised it here. It will be important to just make sure that as we continue to present to different stakeholders, including the NCOP, we emphasize this point as these are coming from the old cases, and if there are new developments, we're also able to state where are the new developments. And the issue of improving or updating supplier chain, I think, is quite critical, including the appointments of the new DAs and their grouping so that they can fast-track issues of applications, and we make sure that we can clear the dashboard as soon as possible. So I'm relatively hearing the committee that we are quite pleased with the progress that is being made, but we just need much more interaction and reporting on certain areas, especially those that have been emphasized in the main. I would like to maybe give Prof to say a final word, because we are now aware that he will be leaving soon, and there's a process that is going to ensue in Parliament, just to say a final word, and then we can move to the next item.
Chair, my apologies, Chair. Mr. Gama and Mr. Chance raised their hands, Chair, maybe before the Prof.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Mr. Chance and Mr. Gama. Apologies, Prof.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, Chair. I thought you wanted to be heard to be closing this topic, and I did not want to speak after you've spoken. But I had raised some residual questions with the National Gambling Board, to which I don't appear to have received any responses. So before you close that particular topic, at some point, if you could just allow them to answer my residual questions. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry we missed that. Member Chance?
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to just pick up on your point you made just now, and would like to ask have the adverts or has the advertisement for the replacement of the chair actually gone out? Because we're running on a very tight deadline, and if you look at the committee's program, we're due to consider the first issue this month even, and make a decision next month. But please, could we get some information from the DG as to the status of that advertisement? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we start with the gambling board first, and then the DG, and then Prof will be the last.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we are obviously in your hands, so we're going to respond to those questions. I think that the first question that the Honorable Gama referred to was the issue of the self-exclusion register. I think that we had dealt with that one earlier. But just to add that the NGB has done some work in terms of the preparatory work in relation to the self-exclusion register. And as it is now, it is not something that is law yet. Once it becomes law, we will be implementing it without a challenge on our side. And we'll be strengthening it, obviously, with the kind of collaborations that we had highlighted earlier. So that is very important, we do believe. But I think that once it becomes law, we should be fine to implement as an NGB. And then the other issue around the online gambling and the fines that need to be considered, I just wanted to mention, Chair, that you see the issue with the illegal online gambling and the fines that actually there is a provision on the NGA, and the NGA provides for a certain level of fines. For example, there's a limit of about 10 million and 10 years in prison. But what happens with these issues is that they don't even go to court. They end up at the police stations, and then people pay fines and they go. The issue being that there's an issue of capacity and the collaboration we need to have with the NPA and the SP and the SAPS in order to capacitate them and engage them on the importance of this. Hence, we're saying that this should be a priority crime so that it can be dealt with at the appropriate level. Our team is also engaging the NPA on that matter to make sure that we deal with it comprehensively and make the kind of the input as impact as we would have wanted to make in this regard. So there are set fines in terms of the National Gambling Act, which are between the issue of the limit of 10 million and 10 years in prison in this specific instance. I think we must just make sure that it is a priority crime and receives the attention that it's supposed to get. The issue of the shutting down, we don't have the mandate to just shut down on those, because most of these are electronic and they are online by nature. So we do not have that a capacity or mandate to just close them like that. Hence, we talk to the Department of Communications, ICASA, and the ISPs to make sure that that is closed at the level of the internet and the relevant ways of doing with those ones. In fact, Curacao we're talking about, they have actually ignored our request to make sure that they manage that thing on their side. So I think that it's something that we must deal with and make sure that it has an impact, and the legislation would help in this regard. The issue of how long would it take to amend laws, I think that the Honorable Chair has spoken to some of the issues about the online gambling and the kind of the work that would happen. I think that would mainly be a parliamentary process. I think I have covered the ones, Chair. Safe to also just briefly explain the issue of those unlawful winnings. Those issues of the unlawful winnings, we are seized with them. The winnings themselves are not an issue, in fact, are an issue of just paying attention to the winnings that may have happened in the illegal platforms, as we would have put there. So that work is work that is ongoing, and we are working on it. It's just that it just needs to be simplified, in that we must not be going through a long and expensive process of the court in order to have them forfeited to the state when they have been won in an illegal manner. So let me leave it there, Chair, without moving to other areas. Thank you very much.
I think it's Prof now.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and honorable members. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I had, in fact, made mention of my tenure in the statement that I'd proposed at the beginning, but got undermined by technology. And that will be made available to the Portfolio Committee with all my appreciation and gratitude. The Director General may be best in making the confirmation of what I'm about to say, that indeed I did seek permission from the Minister to terminate my services, take retirement from the National Lotteries Commission. And after consultation between us, it was then agreed that because of the time that it is, I should be open to stay on as chair until such time as an appointment is made formally in the right places. And the arrangement, therefore, is that I shall remain in office until there is an appointment. I'm also glad to say that the advertisements have gone out, and I should imagine about now the shortlisting should be taking place. I'm particularly on behalf of the board appreciative of the fact that the Minister has taken steps to advertise the other position that was never taken up at the time when the appointments were made. So as a result, we now have, in fact, two formal vacancies, that of the chair and that of a member of the board. There's a lot of appreciation for that. We're hoping that the processes will proceed and the appointments will be made in due course. And I have made an undertaking to the Minister that there will be a proper handover with the new chairperson once the chairperson is appointed. Thank you very much, Chair. I think that's the message that I wish to give. Thank you. DG?
Chair, through you, the chair's summary is correct. The applications have already closed. If I recall well, the long list currently has about 35 or so names that have been availed and submitted to the Minister earlier this week. And the shortlisting process will then commence with Minister forwarding the same submission once he has approved and considered to the relevant authorities to commence with the shortlisting. So that is where we are, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think we are fine. Is there other agenda item, Andre?
Sorry,
No,
Chair, I just have one more question, if I may. Just
Yes.
on this matter. Sorry about the extension. Yes, the regulations governing the appointment of the chairperson are very clear that the advertisement must be placed in 2 national newspapers at least. And we haven't seen it. In fact, if you search for it, you can't find it anywhere online. And I'd just like to be reassured that the committee is reassured that this step has been followed procedurally. And if we can possibly be told where the advertisement was placed, and could we see the advertisement itself and when it was placed?
Member Chance, I'm not sure. Is it not maybe prudent that we wait, and then that becomes our first question? We wait to look into the procedure, and then
The reason I'm mentioning it, Chair, sorry to interrupt, is because if you go back to the appointment of the previous chair, it took about 18 months because the procedures were not followed correctly. And this led to litigation. It led to disputes between the NLC itself and the DTIC and the minister. The minister was taken to court. It was a complete mess. And I just want for the assurance of all participants in this process that absolutely every dot has been, dotted and T crossed, as it were. I think it's important that the committee is assured that this process has been followed to the letter.
Oh, okay. DG, do you wanna maybe have a bite, because I would have thought differently, but I don't want to sound oppressive. Just take us into confidence on just procedural issues as far as you know.
So, Chair, thank you very much. The advert was gazetted on the 19th of September in the established National Gazette, Government Gazette, and it was advertised indeed in 2 national newspapers, being the Sunday Times and the City Press. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. What we will request, just maybe in the covering letter that's going to come to Parliament, it will just have to explain all those procedural things and the processes that took place so that we are together. We don't start from disputing the process. So if that thing can be in writing, I think it will assist. Thank you very much. And I think, colleagues, we are fine. Do we need to formally adopt the reports?
No, Chair. We concluded the business for today, Chair. The agenda items, Chair.
Okay. Then we all good. Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you to the DG and commissioners and acting commissioners. The meeting is officially adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair.
Colleagues.